Hi everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. And welcome to a video that I've been meaning to do for a while and then just didn't do. And then my friends Chloe and Tamika both did it as a collaboration. And I was like, hey Tamika, it's funny that you just did this video because I literally the day before made my notes for this list. And she's like, that's what we're about in Booktube. We all copycat each other. And it's not like this idea was first Tamika's anyway, but I just wanted to acknowledge that. Yes, I saw that she just made it, but I think that this information is always really fun to know. And what is that information? Well, you probably already know because you clicked on this video, but today I have a list of my auto-buy authors that I wanted to talk about, whether this, from every genre, like I have books from every genre here, and these are also authors that a few of them I plan to do deep dives into their work. Because I've read significant amounts of their backlist, and it's just fun to talk about all the characters in those books and why I love those books and what tropes are my favorite and why the author's writing touches me so much. And so we are going to dive into that. So I don't have these in any particular order. I literally just went through my phone app where I have all of my books listed, and then I went through my Goodreads and looked at which authors I've read the most books of and which ones I want to continue to read their work, because there's some authors where I've read a lot of their work and then over time I just don't like what I'm seeing, or I binge a bunch of them but then I don't want to read any more of them, so they don't stay an auto-buy author for me. So what am I looking for in an auto-buy author? Usually an author that has a big backlist for me to binge, or else they're an author I started reading when I was young and I just have continued to read them, or they're an author that they just consistently punch me in the gut with their books. There are definitely a couple of those. Or they're just like cotton candy for me. I have a couple authors that their books are just a good smutty time, and I know when I pick up their books what I'm going to get out of it. And there's something very satisfying and comforting about knowing when you pick it up what you're going to get out of it. Yeah, so let's go ahead and start. And again, these aren't in any particular order. Also, I'm not showing you the entire stack that I own for each author. I just grabbed like a book or two that I like the most because I didn't want to tear my shelves completely apart to bring them all to you. So I'm starting with Sarina Bowen. So I have two different books for her to show you. I actually have the first book I ever read by her, which was actually a co-authored book. This is actually the second one I accidentally grabbed. Oops. So it's the second book I read by her. But this is part of the Him and Us series. So Him is actually the first one, and this is a male-male hockey romance. This was childhood friends to lovers. One of them is gay and the other one thinks that he's straight, and then when he meets back up with an old friend after a long time, they end up getting it on together. And then Us is the sequel to that. But she wrote this with Elle Kennedy. Elle Kennedy is also an author that I like, but Sarina was someone that I really, the lighting is just gonna fuck with us today. There's a lot of clouds, so the sun's gonna keep doing that to us all day. But anyway, I just really enjoyed this. This was one of my first male books anyway, so that was exciting. But then I actually clung on to Sarina, and I ended up reading her entire, what is it called? Wow, I just forgot the name of the series. Let me look it up. Of course it doesn't have it in here because this is one of the traditionally published ones. But anyway, so there is the Brooklyn Bruiser series, but that is a spin-off of a college series that she did. It's a series of 5 books. What's it called? Why is it not in the back of their books? What are they called? I don't know, but there's 5 books in a series of college that are also sports romances. And I read all of those, and then there is an adult series that comes off of it. That one's more kind of new adult. That is the Brooklyn Bruiser series. And this is about a hockey team and just the ups and downs of that. And there's just something about, these were some of my first sports romances too. I'd only read 1 or 2 here or there, and I didn't think that they would be one that I like. But the thing is, in sports, there's lots of alphas. They're usually rich, so you have that going for it. It's usually really hard-working guys. I love when a hardworking guy falls super hard for a girl and just puts everything into that relationship. That gets me so excited. So Serena, there's just something about her writing. I've read 90% of her books. There's still a couple of her oldest series that I haven't read, including like the Man series, I think. There's like Man Cuffed, Manscaped, whatever. I'm slowly collecting those when she has them for free because I'm on her mailing list. So I have like 2 out of the 4. And so I'm waiting until I get all of them. She's co-authored some other series with people as well. But I just really connect with her stories. And I know that even when she starts a new series that I'm really going to like it. And so that's something about her that I really appreciate, that I'm going to like whatever she does. So then I will just show this beauty real quick because this is one of the authors that I'm going to do the deep dive on. I am going to film that either probably right after this one or pretty soon, and that is T.L. Swan. So I actually just own 5 of her books, but I have read her entire backlist except for 1 book, and I'm really kind of saving it for a rainy day because she puts out about 2 to 3 books a year, so I don't usually have to wait too long for hers. But a couple of her books, both of her new releases for this year are probably going to be on my favorites list of the year, which is The Takeover, which I've talked about in a million books, and then Our Way, which I talk about all the time as well. T.L. Swan, she writes, wow, like, I don't even know how to describe her. So she writes pretty hard-hitting contemporary, as in the characters are pretty angsty, and so there's a lot of obstacles for the people to be together usually. Probably her lightest series is the Stopover series, which is the Miles High Club, which is the Stopovers first, and then the Takeover is actually the second book in the series. That's probably her lightest series, but even then, she has pretty angsty men. Most of them are like billionaires or millionaires. She has 1 mafia book, which was my first book I ever read by her, maybe, The Italian. Maybe it wasn't. I might have read the Stanton series first. I can't remember. But she just gets me addicted. Her books are always really chunky. Seriously, like the thinnest one is Stanton series, and that's still 400 pages. So she does not pull her punches with it. Some people can see that as that they grown on too long. This is something I've talked about her before. However, I'm usually so addicted to her characters that I don't want them to end. So I'm a pretty big fan of when they just keep going and going. That's something about me. So if I really love characters, I don't mind if there's a little bit of whistling through the tulips going on. But some people want it to get in, get out, get to the point. And if you were to not care about the characters, it could seem like a really long story. But yeah, T.L. Swan is someone that I always jump on it to get to read one of her books. I just really love them. I always really connect with hers. Her stories are all pretty different, and I just think there's something for everyone. So T.L. Swan, definitely one of my Autobuy authors. My favorite book by her is The Takeover, followed probably by Our Way. I know I just said that. But then I really like The Italian, which is supposed to get a follow-up soon. It was kind of funny. I was looking through, and she does have listed was it in Adore? She does have listed that she will be putting out a sequel to The Italian, but it just hasn't happened yet. And she doesn't, that's one of the things with self-published authors is that they can kind of just write it whenever they want. So you could get it whenever. Then I have another author that I have done a deep dive for. It has been on my channel for a while now, and that is Julia Quinn, The Duke and I. This is my original copy that I have of The Duke and I. Here's the nice back cover. I'm working on getting all the hardcovers of these books. This is getting a lot of attention because the Netflix show Bridgerton is coming out Christmas this year. So this book series that I've loved for the last almost 10 years. Some people have loved it even longer than that. Is finally getting some attention. But there's more to Julia Quinn than just the Bridgertons. She has, I believe there's between 35 and 40 books. I can't remember. Again, if you go to the deep dive for that one, I give a tiny little, like I tell you what the trope is and who the characters are for that entire series. So, or all of her books. I own all of her books. I have multiple copies of all of her books. The Bridgertons are probably my favorite, but I also really enjoy the Lost Duke of Wyndham, like duology, the Wyndham duology, which is a story told about these two guys, one who's the Duke and one's an imposter Duke. And then so both books are the same story, but with different points of view in it. And it's one of the best ways that I've like ever seen that done. I really liked it. And I just love her books. They are lighter historical romances. She's a place I tell people to start a lot of times. There's lots of humor, there's lots of fun, there's still some sexy times, and they're just sweet. Like, Julia Quinn just has a place in my heart, and I'm always going to buy her books, and she's just going to be an Autobuy author for me as long as she keeps writing. I'll do the other historical authors I have right here as well. Another one is Eloisa James. So this is her newest book that came out, Say Yes to the Duke. There is a prequel to this series coming out just next week. Maybe it's out already. The step back's not super great. It's a bit too plasticky for me for having real people in it. I don't know, but it's a beautiful cover. This one is. This author has a lot of books. Here's a list of her backlist. And I've read all of her books except for 3 of them, which is part of her, like, her Love by the Numbers series, I think. I'm not sure. But there's 3 of those books I haven't read. Again, the case of, like, saving them. One of them I think we're going to buddy read next month because I think it's going to get voted for. But Eloisa James, kind of the same thing as Julia Quinn. She tends to have sometimes a bit darker plot. I would consider her a little bit of a level more into angst than Julia Quinn has. Especially her older books. There was some pretty intense ones back then. The first and second like series she put out. There's one about these 4 siblings who all have this guardian. And I think those ones were Your Wicked Ways, Much Ado About You, Kiss Me Annabelle, Taming the Duke, Pleasure for Pleasure. Those ones were a lot more angsty and sexy too. But I love Eloisa James. She's fun. I love it because I believe she's like a doctor, like not a human doctor, but like a professor doctor. And she like keeps her, she's this famous writer and is amazing. And she's just kept it quiet all these years because women are looked down, or looked as less than for doing so. But she's brilliant. Like, brilliant women write romances, okay? There ain't no dum-dums doing it. Then the other historical author I have to show, of course, is Tessa Dare. She's an Autobuy for me. I also own all of her books, but I haven't read this series yet, which is like the 1, 2, 3. It's like One Night with a Duke, One Dance with a Duke, Twice Tempted by a Rogue, and then 3 Nights with a Scoundrel. And I also haven't read her Dairymaid trilogy, which is The Goddess of the Hunt, Surrender of a Siren, or Lady of Persuasion. But I have read all of her other books, and there's just something so sweet about her. She's another one, very fun, but also very sexy. Her books have really great steam in them, are really funny, and they have varying plot degrees. Some are more serious than others. And she's just a delight. I think she is a lot of people's gateway to historical romance. She's an author I always suggest because she's very readable. They're quick. You don't have to know much about the time periods to enjoy this, to dive into it. So she's definitely someone I suggest to people when they've never tried a historical before. She is someone that I highly recommend. So she's a good one. And yeah, I just will always go for her. So who do we go to next? Let me see. All right, let's go with this one. So if you watch many of my, darker romance recommendations or things like that, you've probably seen Katee Robert come up a time or two. She is amazing. So she is an Autobuy author for me. I am actually a patron of hers. So I get access to all of her books before they get released to the public at this point. But the thing about her is Katee Robert has all of those books and all of these books in her backlist, and even more that aren't listed on here because they belong to publishers or they are no longer in print. And I am slowly collecting all of her books. I am only about halfway there. I think less than halfway there. And so I have not read all of her books, but I love her. She writes very sexy books. A good intro to her is probably her Mafia series, which is why I have it up here. They were the first thing that I read by her, starting with the marriage contract, which it's very funny. So I only read Katee Robert for the first time back in November of last year. So it's only been a year. I feel like it's been forever, but also not long enough. But I just love her. I love how she writes. She does great humor. She has great heroes. She has great villains. This is the first, in her Wicked Villain series, which is ending in November. The last book in this series will come out. This series is about a BDSM club in a fictional city that is run by the villains from your favorite Disney. This is called the Wicked Villain series. She even has a cool little, and they're great. There's one about Jafar, one about Hook, one about Hercules, Meg, and Hades. There's one about Belle, Beast, and Gaston. They're just great. They're sexy, they're fun, and I love them. But she has other great ones too. So I'm still working my way through hers, but she is an auto-buy for me for sure, for her backstock and for anything new she writes. She has this series called Taboo Treats she's working on. The third one will be coming out in the next month or two. That one's going to be a daddy kink book. Like, she just hits me every time. I know that I'm going to get the sex that I want and a fun time. The newer books, like, you're not really getting into them to get serious about plot, because with Katee Robert, in case you haven't heard, banging is the plot of her books, and I would say that's the truth for a lot of them. But here's the thing, when an author is writing erotica, the sex moves the story forward, not the plot. So there's a lot of very emotional and intense scenes that she writes that, like, I've teared up during sex scenes in her books before because they're so powerful about what's happening, whether that's a power dynamic happening in the, BDSM series, or it's because people went through trauma and they're working through that. And I love her. Katee Robert, she will be an auto-buy author for the rest of the time that she's writing. She's amazing. She also puts out 5 to 6 books a year, sometimes more when she's writing novellas. She's a machine. It's bananas. So then I want to talk about another new to me author who I just started her books back in July of this year, and I have read almost all of her books up to date. There's just a few that I haven't read, and that is Kresley Cole. So I'm actually holding up the last book. This is the currently the most recent book in the Immortals After Dark. It starts with A Hunger Like No Other, right? And so then she has all of these books in here. So I actually haven't read the Arcana Chronicles either, which I think that is a YA series, but I'm not sure about that. But yeah, so there is like 18 books in this series plus 2 novellas. There's another book coming out. Well, I mean, we don't know how many there'll be, but it's been being held off for now. I don't know if that's just because she hasn't finished writing it or because of COVID. I don't know, but I want it. I started reading these books because of the Fated Mates podcast. I found the Fated Mates because someone recommended them as a romance podcast, and then I found out like why it's called Fated Mates and what they were talking about, and it still took me about another year before I tried Immortals After Dark, and I'm obsessed with it. I loved it. So then she had this trilogy she put out called the Game Maker series, which is the professional, the master, and the player, and these are both, all of these have versions of BDSM in them. One's about a mobster, one's about a businessman, and then one is about a like tech genius. There's an arranged marriage in one. There's a little bit of like a captor-captive. Kind of. It's like a dubious captor-captive, but she doesn't mind being captive to that. And then this one is like a secret mafia princess. They are just so sexy and fun and a little bit bonkers, a lot bonkers, because Kresley Cole pulls no punches. And so I love this series. And then the two series, well, I guess three, like I said, that I haven't read is I haven't read the Merrick Brothers trilogy yet, but I own it. And I also haven't read the Sutherland Brothers, which is a duology, which is The Captain of All Pleasure and The Price of Pleasure, which I also have that. I just haven't read it yet. So she, again, fits for Autobuy because I've bought her entire collection. So even the ones I haven't got to yet, I plan to. And she just writes, her stories just suck you in. They just suck you in. And they don't want to let you go. Like, I love them. The Immortals After Dark, the first couple books can be rough for people if you've never read paranormal before. And it had been many years since I'd read a paranormal, but I was into dark romance and, like, erotica and stuff like that. So it was just a good mix of, like, fantasy and paranormal, and the women are kick-ass. And where there is dubious consent or non-consent in those books, it gets addressed and is put in there for a purpose. It's not gratuitous violence against women or things like that. In fact, a lot of the women in this series are more powerful, and the men's happiness depends on how well they treat their woman, and there are consequences when they don't, and there's just so much to be learned. So definitely with that series, give it its due chance. You know, like don't back out too early is what I would say. Like, give it some time because it's really worth it. Then I want to talk about Sierra Simone. This book, I remember hearing this book talked about, the first person I ever heard mention it was Jess from Peace Love Books. And I don't know if it was when she was reading it for the first time or whether she was putting it in a taboo thing or something, but she told me about this book, which was about a priest falling in love with one of his flock and then having lots of sex with her. And I'm not Catholic, but I am a Christian, and I was a little bit concerned about what this story was going to do and what it was, but I decided to give it a chance because I'm a twisted, dirty bird, and I was like, let me see what this is. There's a lot of special things about this book specifically, and that is, number one, this is a hero-only point of view. Like, we don't get to see the POV of the love interest, and this is a man who he is beating himself up, and his relationship with the woman is amazing, and I actually really, really like this. And anyway, there's a lot that it is trying to do. But I then, since then, have read all of Sierra Mone's books. She has the new Camelot trilogy, which is a menage between the president and the vice president and the first lady of, it's amazing, but is also a like retelling of Camelot. There is the Markham series, which is a retelling of Jane Eyre with BDSM. The Markham series. And then there is the London Lovers, which is a trilogy. They're like more like novella size, about a character that we meet in the Markham series. And then there is her she has a series that is currently coming out, the last book of which comes out in a couple days, I think, which is a polyamorous, incestuous, ritual sex thing that starts with a lesson in thorns. And I need to reread the first book. I've read 1, 2, and 3. And I wasn't as into darker romance as I was the first time I read the first book. And now I'm number one, know Sierra Simone better. And I also know dark romance better. But I just couldn't look away from it. Sierra Simone, she writes erotica where it really does work. Like, she does work with it. If you've ever listened to her on a podcast or read an interview with her, It's amazing. So I love Sierra Simone. If you are a dark romance lover, you have to have tried her at some point because she's amazing. Like, gosh, she's great. Then I have Krista and Becca Ritchie. They are Autobuy authors for me. They're so good. This is someone else that I only have read this year, which is crazy. But I first started with them by reading Damaged Like Us, which I realized was a little bit of a mistake. But I also don't regret it because when I went back and read Addicted to You, which is the first book that kind of starts off this whole long saga. So if you don't know, Krista and Becca Ritchie, they pretty much only write the Calloway family, is what I would call it, even though they all end up with different names. Besides like one duology they have, that's a side thing. And it starts with Addicted to You, which is the series that blends with the Calloway sisters, Calloway, whatever. And then this is actually a sequel series that's about the children of the couples from this series. So I read this one first, Damaged Like Us, because it's a male-male romance. And after I read Him and Us, I really wanted to read another male-male romance. And so I found Maximoff and Pharaoh, and this is a bodyguard and millionaire series. And then I realized that this is the sequel series and that it actually starts with Addicted to You and then the Calloway series. And I just love them. So they're an Autobuy author for me because the next like 8 books they have coming out are all in this series about the children, and I want to keep reading them. They write they're a famous family. They're a little bit like the Kardashians, but not. I don't know who else to compare them to, just because they are in a reality show and then they're a part of this reality show for like 10 years and then their kids start like spin-off shows. So that's why it makes me think of like, you know, Kardashians or a Desperate Housewife where there's all these spin-offs or whatever. And I just love it. I'm addicted to their books. They change the couples. Like the first 3 are about the same couple, and then it's about a different couple, and then it's about this couple again, and then there's a new couple. Like it's going to keep going. The newest one coming out is going to be a polyamorous relationship. That's not a menage. So I'm pretty interested to see how that goes because it's like 2 best friends who are going to love the same woman, but they're not gay. So like they're not going to be together. And I'm really interested to read. I really like these authors. I really respect what they're doing. And I love when a series about the same characters just keeps going. I think that's something that's so great about self-publishing is that you have your audience and you can keep writing for your audience and not have to worry about pleasing the greater world as a whole. So I like that a lot. Then the last one there's 2 I want to mention. So one of them is Nikki Sloane. This is another author. I've read everything that she's written. I've read her, what's it called? I just forgot the name of it. The Dirty Little Secrets series or The Blindfold Club. The Blindfold Club series by her, which is about a club that's kind of like a high-end date service, I guess you'd call it. Then there's also her Sordid Duet, which is super twisted. And then there is her Filthy Rich American series, which is amazing as well. She, again, someone who writes erotica, but really hits me with it. The Filthy Rich American series is so interesting. Like, it's fantastic. And then, yeah, I just love her. I don't know what else to say at this point. The Blindfold Club series that is a BDSM series, but I like it because it talks about like rules a lot and like limits and, you know, how we push those limits and which limits we don't push and things like that. And I just love that stuff. I just eat it up. I love it. And then there is, there's one book of hers left I haven't read, and I actually bought it, but I haven't read it yet. And that's called The Rivalry, which I think is a standalone sports romance. She writes really dirty sex. It's really sexy, but her characters have heart, and I just enjoy it so much. So much. And then the last author I want to talk about, and this author just continues to surprise me. And I just will instantly purchase anything she puts out. And the thing is, she doesn't really like hype it up too much beforehand, so it just is there. And I'm just like, girl, I like follow you on social media, and I didn't see this book was coming out until the day that you dropped it, which is just, and that's Jade West, okay? So Jade West writes dark shit, okay? There is about 5 books of hers I haven't read, and that's because they're too dark for me, right? She has this trilogy that is about sexual slavery / forced prostitution, and I just couldn't do it. I tried. I got halfway through the first one, and it was just too violent for me. But other books of hers do some work. The Hello Stranger was one of her newer releases. I talked about that in depth in my contemporary standalone video that just came out. She just had a new one called Heartless, which is going to be a mafia series, a trilogy, I think. The first one's called Heartless. She has a book called Poison, which is about a woman who has, oh wow, I just forgot what it's called. It's where you faint sometime, you have seizures. I forgot, I'm so sorry. But the author actually got diagnosed with this, so it was a own voices for this disability, and it was amazing. It was amazing. And then one of my favorites by her is called Bait. It was one of the first books by her I read, and it is a consensual non-consent rape fantasy. This woman finds someone who will fulfill that for her. I really, really liked that one. She also has a couple Daddy Kink books, which my friend Tamika, who really likes Daddy Kink, says they're not that great, but I really like them. She has a couple Menage stories that I really like. So she has a really good mix of just kind of smutty books and then some like Poison and Hello Stranger that have really good messages, and they take you to a dark place, but then they like show you something afterwards. Yeah, so I just really, really love Jade West. And pretty much all of her books are on KU. I think I've bought a couple of them, but most of them are on KU. So, okay, I'm going to wrap that up now. This is a list of my Autobuy authors. There probably are more of these, but these are just the ones that like popped into my head the most when I thought about it. I hope you'll give them a try. Let me know who your Autobuy authors are. I know we all got some of them. I didn't even mention any of the YA there are for me, just because those authors I feel like don't put out the level of books that I want. Also, side note to Diana Gabaldon, who I'm going to buy everything that she does, right? But it's so many years in between each thing. These are pretty much all authors that you're getting like yearly books from them, and there's someone that I actually like consciously am Autobuy for them. Like I check for when their new books are coming out. Whereas some other ones, yes, I'm always going to buy whatever they put out, but it could be years in between them. So I don't get as intense about it. But there you go. That is my Autobuy authors. Make sure you subscribe to this, hit like, leave me a comment about what you think. You can find me on all the social medias as The Book Refuge, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.